Well, hello and welcome to Knife Delights. Today I'm going to do an open tag response to North Star Knife Reviews. Ray asked us to tell us a story of a knife of our fathers or any other special knife, a relative, friend, or something, a special knife that you may have in your collection, and then, tell a story. Well, I was already all set up for cleaning knives up, restoring knives. So I thought this morning I would just grab this old fish knife. Well, actually, it's a small hunting knife, almost like a fillet knife that my father owned. I found in his tackle box, and I just did a video, a 3 for Thursday video, I think it was, on the 3 knives of my dad's that I found in his tackle box. But so I thought I'd just kind of clean up this knife and sheath a little bit and kind of tell a little bit of a story. So, my dad, well, he was born in the Depression era, and his father was a farmer, and Grandpa never owned his own farm. He was almost what I consider to be kind of like a sharecropper. But anyway, back in those days, the insurance companies owned a lot of farmland. And so I guess a property would get foreclosed on or such, and the insurance company would get a hold of it. And then they'd have Grandpa move on to the farm and get the farm operating and working, get the buildings all fixed up. And then, of course, Grandpa got to farm the land, and so I guess he had to share in the profits with the insurance company. But they had a place to live, had a place to farm. It was a tough existence. As Dad would say, they'd move into these old farms and the farmhouses, and they wouldn't be fit to live in. And so they'd work, 2, 3, 4 years, hard work, getting the buildings all up to snuff, get the farm operating good. And about the time that they had a livable place and good land and getting some good crops, why, the insurance company would sell the farm and they'd have to move and on to the next one and kind of start that process all over again. Well, one of the things they used to do, I guess, for some entertainment, was to go fishing. Now, it wasn't just entertainment for them. It was a means to get some food. And I just got to say, being here in Iowa, what they would fish for, the fish they'd fish for, was bullheads. Bullhead is a member of the catfish family. Sorry, furnace just kicked on. I'm going to keep rolling here, though. So anyway, the bullhead's member of the catfish family. And especially nowadays, a lot of people just think of them as trash fish. They catch them and they just kind of see them as a menace, I guess. They don't want nothing to do with them. But for Dad and Grandpa, and both of my grandpas, they avidly fished for bullheads. This is a Normark knife out of Finland. Just a nice little hunting knife. Yeah, cleaned that brass up pretty good there, didn't we? Anyway, oh, by the way, I should say, cleaning the sheath, cleaning it with some saddle soap. I'll let it dry and then I'll put some conditioner on it. But the saddle soap will help, it cleans it, and it has like a conditioning property all of its own. You can see it's cleaned it up, made it look a lot nicer just with the saddle soap. But anyway, so they'd fish for bullheads, and so as I was growing up, when Dad and Grandpa was going fishing, my brothers and I, we'd kind of beg to go along fishing with them, and sometimes they'd take us, sometimes not. Sometimes Dad, I think, just wanted to go fishing with his brothers-in-laws and his dads and other relatives, and kind of the men thing, kind of a guy's night out. They'd go to one of the area lakes and try their luck fishing for bullheads. But on those occasions that us kids got to go along, it was just a great time. We got to stay up late, for one, because they'd fish late into the night, and they'd get a fire going. And of course the old coffee cans were actually cans, so they'd get some hobo coffee going. So they'd have their hobo coffee going, just boiling the water in the coffee can and adding water when they needed to and adding grounds to it when they needed to. And if the fish were biting, they'd fish late into the night. And they always had 5-gallon buckets, and they'd catch them bullheads and throw them in the 5-gallon buckets. So sometimes they'd get home from fishing, or we'd get home from fishing and have several 5-gallon buckets full of bullheads. Well, then the cleaning time started. So they'd all sit down and start cleaning their bullheads. Now, what's funny is, the joke always was, being from Iowa, if we ever went up into Minnesota to do some fishing, the land of 10,000 lakes, if we're, slowly driving around the lake looking for a place to fish, why, the people would see the Iowa plates and they'd say, "Oh, the bullheads are biting over on the west side of the lake." So I guess Iowans kind of known for fishing for the bullheads, although that's kind of gone away. Again, it's not a sport fish, not like walleye and northern pike and such. But I gotta tell you, this time of year, late April, May, and into maybe middle of June, depending on the weather, when the water was still cold and you get them nice big yellow belly bullheads, and you get them cleaned up, I'll tell you what, they are tasty. And my dad knew how to fry them up. He sure was a good bullhead fryer. And a lot of the old folks around here yet today, if I was to catch a good mess of bullheads, there's a lot of the older folks would really appreciate it if I gave them a few to fry up. They are tasty. Now, if you wait till later on in the summer and the water's warmed up and this and that, then they can kind of get a little bit of a muddy taste to them. So, yeah. I remember going up into southern Minnesota several times with my dad, and there was some small lakes, and we catch some really nice yellow belly bullheads. I mean, they'd be, pound and a half, about the size. After you got them clean, they would just kind of like fit across your plate. And again, you got them in the springtime, early when the water was still cold, and I'll tell you what, them bullheads were tasty. They really were. Look at that. There's a little knife cleaned up pretty nice, didn't it? Yeah. Dad, you picked a good one. This is a nice knife. Let's see if I can... Now the lakes around here are pretty shallow lakes. They may be 15 to 25 feet, in the deepest spot, and they're kind of called prairie potholes. So they're not the deepest lakes, but they're good lakes for bullheads. Yeah, I think it's ready for a season of fishing and cleaning some bullheads. What do you think? Well, getting back to the Depression era, it was sometime in the, I think, late 30s, maybe early 40s. Um, we had a really bad winter, and the ice froze really, really thick one winter. And it was a long winter, and I guess the state decided or thought that maybe a lot of the fish were going to die due to lack of oxygen, being since the ice was so thick and it had been in the lake for so long. And so the state went up, and at one of the lakes in particular that Dad told me about, they cut big holes in the ice, and people could go up there and get all the fish they wanted. There was no limits. The state just decided, rather than just let the fish die off, that they'd let people get them. So Dad said they'd go up there with pitchforks, and when the state would cut that hole in the water, why the fish would come up to get up to the surface, try to get some oxygen, and they'd be standing there with pitchforks and just pitchfork them out onto the ice and then pick them up and throw them in buckets. So, kind of an interesting story. But once again, they did this because it was nice to have something good to eat. Times were tough. I hear those Depression era stories here, and of course, being on a farm, they were lucky. They usually had something to eat. They'd have some chickens and ducks and pigs and some cows, a few head of cattle. Just about every farmer had just a little bit of livestock. Unlike today, where they're all like great big beef producers or pork producers. Back then, every farmer had a few animals. Yeah. Clean the sheath up here. Boy, that sure made a difference, didn't it? Yeah. Well, now I just recently did a cleaning and refurbishing restoration video on a Imperial fish knife, and I said, well, I really didn't want it to go an hour, so I edited a lot of stuff out. And I think Matt or Slippy, he's calling himself Slippy now, from Slip Lloyd and Sawyer, says, I'd watch it for an hour. Well, Slippy, sorry to disappoint you. We're about 13 minutes in here, and I think I'm just about done. Just about done. The knife looks good. The sheath looks good. Yep, I think I'm ready. Here in the next day or so, if the weather holds up, maybe I'll go catch me a mess of bullheads. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little cleaning video and my little tale of growing up and fishing with my dad and grandpas. So until next time, have a very delightful day.